You are listening to the Tri-Quarter Transmissions, episode 128. And now, here are Jeff and Ian.
Covering Gold Key Comics, issue number 38, entitled One of Our Captains is Missing. I am Jeff Hewlett, and with me is my Gold Key Comics co-host, Mr. Ian Adams.
Hello.
How's it going, sir?
Doing pretty well.
All right, so you know what? This Gold Key is interesting here. We have a again, it's an unknown author. And I'm not quite sure why that is. That I haven't seen a modern comic book that doesn't list who wrote it, but maybe that was just a thing back then. And this is not the first time that's happened in Gold Key, but I think this issue is a landmark issue in the fact that we finally, after all this time, we have a change of artist. It is no longer Alberto Giolitti. It is an artist by the name of Alden McWilliams, who I think Ian has quite a few things to say about. And I have a couple of things I can say about him as well. He was born in 1916, passed away in March of 1993 at the age of 77, so that was a little while ago. He was an illustrator who worked on 22 issues of Gold Key Comics, so we'll have him for quite a while.
Yeah, it looks like all the way to the end of the series.
Yeah, pretty much. 22 more issues, give or take a few, but pretty close to the end, yeah. And he was born in Connecticut, attended the New York School of Fine and Applied Arts, and he actually worked in pulp magazines, as I think a couple of our other writers and artists had as well. And he was most famous for titles like Space Cadets Flash Gordon and Captain Frank Hawk, which I've read Flash Gordon, but not the other two.
Yeah, I've never even heard of Captain Frank Hawk.
Yeah, me neither. But he during the Second World War, he illustrated a number of war stories as well, and he was discharged from the Army in 1945, and he re-entered the comics industry, working on crime and war genre comics. So he's been around for quite a while, and he drew a lot of the Gold Keys. So what do you have about Alden McWilliams?
Well, so this guy looks like he's basically our artist for the remainder of the Gold Key series here. And the art change kind of slaps you in the face in this issue.
I was going to bring that up. I have it as one of my first notes.
Hang on one second. Somehow I turned...
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. How do I... Don't want...
There it goes.
No.
Oh, switch the camera. Nope.
Yeah.
There you go.
Ah. There we go. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know why it did that, but... Okay, so where was I?
Alden McWilliams.
Yeah, so the art change really kind of slaps you in the face in this one. There's, for almost 40 issues, we've kind of gotten used to Alberto Giolitti.
Yeah, we've grown with him.
Yeah, and watched him really kind of take to the role of being the Star Trek artist, where, like the early issues really didn't look like Star Trek at all. Well, as much, I should say. It's not like they had no resemblance, but, towards the end of his run, having, like the bridge would actually look like the bridge, and the Enterprise looked like the Enterprise, and all the uniforms, actually looked like the proper uniforms, and the people looked like the people, and now it's, now, I don't know, like, this guy's not a bad artist.
No, not at all. But
right.
I have a note right here that specifically to call this out, because the you can definitely notice a marked change in the style. You know, the characters still look like the characters, and some of them are very good likenesses, and the ship looks good, but it's hard to describe without actually showing it to somebody, but it's extremely apparent to me when I opened the cover and saw the first that teaser page. I was like, whoa, okay.
Right, especially with the split panel like that.
Yes. Yeah.
By the way, listeners, there's a split panel on the first page. Yeah, and then like just kind of immediately you notice things like whenever he's taken you know, what looks like a publicity still or something like that as reference art, then the characters look pretty much spot on. Otherwise, they like I'm looking at page 3 here. Well, I guess page 2 technically, but and I'm looking at McCoy and Scotty, and I mean they look like them, but just like I don't know, like
yeah, they're close, but not exactly.
Yeah, there's like kind of an uncanny valley thing going on, I think. Like,
yeah, I agree. I completely agree. And I'm sure we'll have specific examples as we go through specific panels that we want to call out. But yeah, definitely something to look for in this issue, people. If you're reading it, compare it to previous issues, and I think the change in artist really stands out to me. I'm sure we'll get used to it.
Yeah, and I'm curious how it evolves over time. You know, if he's going to have the same sort of transformation like Giolitti had.
Yeah, it's like we're starting from zero again.
Right.
Yeah, and hopefully, since I think we're getting into syndication time here, hopefully Alden McWilliams had a better, I guess maybe a pool to pull from, because this issue came out in July of '76.
Right.
So you know, I'm pretty sure you could find some Star Trek on television at that point. And I'm sure Alden McWilliams had seen some. Since he was born in Connecticut, he wasn't Italian. You know, he didn't come from overseas like Giolitti did, who really didn't have a frame of reference aside from some promotional stills. But
right,
I think that his start, Alden McWilliams' start as the artist, seems a little more grounded in Star Trek than Giolitti's did.
Yeah, and the writing in this issue, I think, also helps that because it's a very like Star Trek story. I don't want to like really give anything away, but
it's extremely Star Trek, yeah.
You know, and so it kind of gives him the opportunity to basically do nothing but play in that sandbox of Star Trek.
Yep, I agree. So, are you ready to jump into some of this issue?
Yeah.
All right. So, by the way, the star date. This is another short issue. It's only 23 pages, by the way, and they're getting shorter and shorter. And the star date is 1929.13. So let's talk a little bit about the cover. This is an odd cover here. You've got this weird-looking snake with a bird's head, and I don't know how to describe this exactly,
like
but it
bat wings, maybe.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing. I didn't realize those were wings at first glance. Like, I had to sit and stare at this cover for 30 seconds to writing notes about it before I realized that those were wings and not like a transition between space and a starscape above and the landscape below. I didn't really pick up on that.
Oh, right, because of the ship.
Yeah, I thought there's a spaceship above. I thought that was kind of in outer space, but and then the more I looked at it, I could see that those were definitely wings. But to me, this looks almost like a slug with like a bird's head, like surgically grafted on it. It's like the bird's head is blue, but the body is red and white, and the wings are black. It definitely doesn't look like something that evolved naturally.
Right. Right, it's like kind of Island of Dr. Moreau.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, we'll later find out the reasons for that, but it struck me as odd.
Yeah, and I'm glad Wilson here is still the cover artist.
I agree because he did a good job. You notice how ripped Kirk is there?
Yeah, he is.
Man, we've seen shirtless Shatner a million times on TOS, but he's never that ripped.
Nope.
I mean, his legs look like he's a marathon runner.
Yeah.
For God's sake. Oh, and by the way, people, we're back in loincloths again. Apparently, anytime a Starfleet officer is is lost on a planet somewhere, they lose their uniforms and wind up in a loincloth. So
as one does.
Yeah, as well, it happens to me all the time at work.
Yeah.
I go off site for lunch, and next thing you know, clothes are gone. I'm in a loincloth. Yeah. But yeah, very strange. What about that little ship? There's a little ship that is definitely not. I don't know if I would say it's definitely not a Starfleet-like design. So I was wondering if that's going to turn out to be a Starfleet ship or not, like a new version of a shuttlecraft or something. It's got kind of skis attached to the bottom of it.
Right, which definitely, like the skis plus the general shape of it kind of evokes helicopter, but obviously without the rotors.
Right.
So I don't know, like I just kept looking at that and thinking, helicopter, but without the rotors.
You know what it made me think of? Those like 1950s sci-fi bullet-shaped rocket ships.
Oh yeah.
Those were super popular in cheesy sci-fi movies back then. That was kind of like, but this one has like the skis on the bottom of it, so it looks like it could do a water landing or some kind of a landing on a snowy surface. But I don't know how you land that on some kind of concrete or pavement without
or it could just go down the side of a mountain, just for fun.
Yeah, why not? Or actually, it looks like it could be submersible as well.
Yeah.
So who knows? Interesting. But the thing that struck me as odd about it, and the reason why I thought maybe it was Starfleet, is because it has the Starfleet shuttlecraft colors.
Yeah, totally.
It's got the grays,
mostly
and the
red
reds.
and gray.
Yeah. So that threw me for a loop a little bit. But what else? Did you notice there's a guy on the cover in the background, kind of, that has like a circlet or a crown?
Yeah.
Of some sort on. I wonder what that. I guess when we get into the issue, I guess one of the disconnects for this cover for me is that once we get into the issue, the humanoids that Kirk is fighting with and around don't look like that.
Right.
These look like people.
In fact, even by the time you get to the just open the cover and you look at that first page and you can see they're like quite different.
Yeah, exactly. So that it kind of threw me. I wasn't sure what to expect looking at the cover and then being a little confused. And I mean, the issue clears it up pretty well. This is another one of those interesting disconnects between having another cover artist doing the covers than having the people who do the regular artwork for inside, and having the two not really joined in any meaningful way.
Right.
But I don't know, is that a common practice in comic books? Do they have a cover artist and then separate people for inside?
Like I would say for like Marvel and DC and that kind of thing, no, it's usually the inside artist that does the cover. But this is kind of an older comic, right?
Yeah, 1970s.
And so having a separate cover artist, while not still being terribly common, it was not unheard of.
Fair enough. All right.
Like modern comics, the only thing that I can even think of where you had a specific cover artist was Neil Gaiman's Sandman. Which had Dave McKeon for all 70 whatever covers.
Yeah. Oh, and recently the City on the Edge of Forever comics had.
Oh yeah.
Juan Ortiz did a set of covers for those.
Yeah, he's so good.
So yeah, they were amazing. What a great series of comics those were. Someday we'll cover them.
Yes.
In 5 to 7 years. We eventually get there. We'll get there. We're not in a rush. So let's see. Blurb on the cover reads. By the way, this is another gold key where the title of the issue is not on the cover. Oh yes, it is actually. Sorry, yep. I'm going to edit that out. So here we go. The blurb on the front reads, Kirk is stranded on a savage planet in... One of our captains is missing, and he lost his shoes.
Dun, dun, dun.
I'm telling you, that foot, Kirk's foot, is very well drawn on the cover.
Yeah.
Here. Very well painted. So, all right. Do you want to say anything else about the cover before we move into the issue?
Just the title. One of our captains is missing.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds suspiciously similar to one of our planets is missing, which I believe we've already covered.
Yeah, that was an animated series episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
which came out long before this issue.
Yeah, a lot of things seem to go missing.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the Star Trek
But only
universe.
one at a time.
Yes, and and cross medium things go missing. So the comic loses people, and the animated series loses entire planets.
Yeah.
But all right,
they like to up the stakes.
Yeah, well, you got to keep it interesting. So all right, so people out there listening along, if you we're about to enter spoiler territory, so if you want to tune out and read the comic yourself. Please feel free to do that because we are going to jump into the teaser page of this comic right now. And we'll start by reading the text at the top of the teaser page. We have the title repeated, one of our captains is missing. And it says, a new commander for the Starship Enterprise and a new and deadly job for Captain Kirk. But the crew may not survive the new commander and Captain Kirk may not survive. And there are an awful lot of exclamation points in there.
Yeah.
Glad that's not changing.
Really,
I wonder, since they changed artists, I wonder if they told Mick Williams, hey, listen, we do exclamation points at the end of every sentence. I don't know how you do it, but I think you need to make sure you follow that paradigm.
Well, they probably had a separate letterer.
You're probably right.
Because, I mean, the lettering looks like kind of standard gold key.
It does.
Lettering, right? Not just standard for this, but like, I remember reading like Donald Duck comics and stuff like that when I was a kid. And like, Archie. I mean, this is right there in that gold key style. So they probably had an in-house letterer or letterers that stayed consistent throughout it all.
I wouldn't doubt that. So we've got, as Ian mentioned earlier, we've got a split panel, and this is a different layout. I don't remember seeing many of these in Gold Key before this. Usually they're full splash pages. So we've got two separate scenarios going on here, one on the ship and one off. And the one on the left, I guess, is the one we'll start with. So it's on the ship. You've got two people here that are obviously, well, maybe not obviously. One's obviously Scotty, but the other one, I think, is Dr. McCoy.
Yeah, except he looks kind of Cary Grant-ish.
He does. Wrong haircut, I think, for McCoy.
Yeah.
Face is partially in shadow, so hard to tell. And the guy in the foreground, I'm assuming, is the new captain who we heard about in the little blurb at the top here. And this is pretty much typical of Scotty here in Gold Key. He's arguing with the new captain that Captain Kirk is in trouble and they've got to help him. But this new captain, whose face we can't see, says, I'm telling you, Mr. Scott, I'm your new commander, and I say back to your stations, every one of you. So we're getting a little foreshadowing here that we're going to have some trouble with Captain Kirk's replacement. And juxtaposed with the other side of this, where we see poor Captain Kirk standing toe-to-toe with who knows what that is. It's a humanoid with kind of yellowish skin, a sword in one hand and a club in the other. And once again, Captain Kirk is on some kind of trial.
Yeah.
And apparently this is also the executioner. So Kirk's in a lot of trouble. So a lot to process here.
Yeah, and you could see Kirk's line coming from a mile away.
Oh, sure.
Some trial they're giving me where the judge is also the jury and the executioner.
Dun, dun. And yeah, it's another one where Kirk is telegraphing an awful lot of what's going on.
Yeah.
We'll see that over and over again later on in the issue here. So I have to say, we said this before, the change of artist is apparent from the very first look at this teaser page.
Yeah,
to me.
Absolutely.
Just the difference in the way that faces are drawn.
Yep.
Still clearly Scotty, but the upper lip kind of throws me.
Yeah.
And, this new captain, who we'll find out his name and a little bit more about him in another page or two, his finger, he's pointing at Scotty, and Scotty's got this kind of like "come at me, bro" kind of look on it. He's kind of standing with his arms out, with his hands exposed. But the new captain has this weird flexibility in his pointer finger, doesn't he? It's like bent upwards and backwards almost. I don't know if I'm trying to do that now, and I can't get my index finger to bend that far upwards.
I can get the front part of it to bend that far up,
Yeah,
but
man, that looks painful. That looks painful. Oh, I don't know. Weird. But you know, I'm sensing almost now. There's been so many times we've seen in TOS, in the movies, in the comics, in the other series of new captains coming on board a ship to take over for the beloved and existing captain, and it's always a friction process, isn't it? Like this is no exception to the rule, and my mind immediately went to Doomsday Machine here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got a Commodore Decker vibe from this, just from this panel, this one panel alone, and it's already setting up the stage for me that, all right, we've got another captain who's got a different style than Kirk did, and everyone's going to be bent out of shape about it, and they're not going to get along, and you know he's going to be new captain hard A, you know,
yeah,
and everyone's going to be threatening mutiny, and so I mean this is super telegraphed. For me.
Yeah, I think if we were going to coin a verb to use whenever we see this, we should say that that the ship got jellicoed.
Nice. We can coin that.
There we go. You heard it here first, ladies and gents.
You heard it here first. Yeah, I you know, question after question about it. I mean, does the Enterprise crew get along with any other captain besides Kirk? You know, even superior
which is kind
officers.
Which is kind of unprofessional of them, really, you know.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And, you know, I have to say that I don't think this would fly in the real military.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, that's serious insubordination. A lot of them would have been in the brig. But, you know, I think it's always implied, and impressively so, I think, in Gold Key because of all the inconsistencies we've seen. But I think here it's implied yet again that Captain Kirk cannot be replaced, right?
Right.
I keep scratching my head thinking to myself, well, you know, the way the crew reacts to a new replacement, even a temporary replacement captain, are they reacting to the loss of Kirk's awesomeness, or do they just have a general resistance to change? I mean...
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it almost seems like a proxy for the fans of that era, right? Like, because you remember when Next Generation first came out,
and God, yes,
like the kind of old guard of fandom, yeah, they were just like not having it. Like, what?
I admit
you can't have Star Trek without Kirk. Come on,
Spock. Believe me, I was right on board with that, and I'll tell you, I was very resistant to Next Gen until I think probably the third season. I started getting into it and giving it a chance. I mean, I watched it, but I'm like, I had that grizzle. I was like, nah, this isn't my Star Trek. Nah, this isn't my Star Trek. But I saw, I was grumbly about it, and I kicked and screamed, and finally I gave it, and I loved it after that. Once I kind of suspended all of that, oh, listen, I had gone through a double blow at that point. You know, they launched the new monkeys and tried to replace my original monkeys. I was mad about that. And then here we got, a new Star Trek without Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. And like, stop rebooting all my stuff. I'm still saying that though, aren't I? About all sorts of other franchises.
Like that was just the beginning.
I'm like, stop, for the love of God. But yeah, another thing about this cover that really stood out to me in the context of the artist change, and I'm sure that you picked up on this too, is that this humanoid alien, even though we have a different artist, looks really similar to prior aliens in Gold Key.
Oh yeah.
So, coincidence, or did McWilliams look at some of the prior issues and take some cues? I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, the kind of bald yellow loincloth guy
Yep.
alien
He's
is
been around.
a pretty tried and true Gold Key trope by this point.
Certainly is. So much so that I was not surprised at all
Yeah,
to see him here. But kind of relieved, kind of the nostalgic thing.
yeah, yeah. Plus I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I really like the story of them in this.
Yeah, I do
Um,
too. I do too.
but I did want to point out one thing
Sure, sure.
on this page, which is down in the indicia, which I don't think we've ever had this particular like they lay out what the publishing schedule is for the
Yes.
comic.
Yes.
It says published monthly except February, April, June, October, and December. And that's like I don't think we've ever had that. We just kind of always guessed at what their publication schedule was, which seemed to be like all over the place.
Yeah, it almost seems kind of arbitrary because you want to say, well, they skip a month in between, but then they skip a few months between June and October.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's weird. I wonder what that production. I mean, I'm sure they had reasons for it, but yeah, doesn't seem apparent to me by reading the list of months that they publish them. And early on in Gold Key, they weren't published that frequently.
No.
Yeah.
That you would have like half a year go between
Yep.
issues sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know how you would even know new ones were coming out. Well, maybe it wasn't a big
Right.
deal back then. You just walked into the store and hey, Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to figure back then in the early 70s when this comic even started in the late 60s, right?
Yep.
So there were no such thing back then as comic shops as we know them.
True.
If you wanted to buy a comic back then, there were like, just a handful of places. You'd go to the drugstore.
Yep.
Or you'd go to like a magazine stand.
Yep. Yep. The newsstand.
Right.
The old
And like
newsstand.
that's basically it.
Yeah,
That
Reader's
was where
Digest, Wall Street
yeah,
Journal, Star Trek Gold Key comic.
right. And so it's like when you're sorry, let me start over here. So it's like when you're damn it. I'm kind of stuttering. So when your choices are that limited as far as where you're going to go get comics, is probably really apparent when there's a new issue, right? Like because
Yeah.
who doesn't go to the drugstore, right?
Yeah,
Like,
they had that one spinning rack
yep,
of comic books. There's maybe 10 different comics on it, probably.
right.
Yeah.
And so I guess back then it didn't really matter, but then by the mid 70s, that was when dedicated comic shops started becoming a thing. Like my Uncle Perry's shop, Xanadu here in Seattle, he started that 41 years ago.
Wow.
Which would be that would be the same year that this issue came out, actually.
Nice. I was 2 years
So
old.
yeah, and like back then, comic shops were such a new thing. Like a lot of them didn't even have cash registers.
Oh,
They just had a little box to store your cash in, and that was it.
Cash box.
um, so I wonder if the more regimented schedule has to do with kind of the rise of comic shops as they were starting to happen in the country.
Good call. Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah, because we are getting a little further on in years here, and that really does seem to explain something. Maybe the comic shops had they had to fill the shelves, and
Yeah.
And of course, that would give these comic publishers more of a market to
Mm-hmm.
address. And yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, nice one. Anything else you want to offer up about the teaser page before we jump in?
No, that was all I had.
Okay, so we're going to start talking through the story here, starting on page 3 for us, since we have the digital version. If you have a physical copy, it would be page 2. So, let's see. Starfleet contacts the Enterprise to inform them that Captain Kirk has been temporarily relieved of command and is being replaced by a Captain Zarlo, who is to arrive by shuttlecraft the following day, but they give no other details about why this is happening. So the crew on the bridge, of course, is stunned by this news. Spock and Scotty track down Kirk and tell him about it, but Kirk dismisses it as a kind of a routine recall, and he's been expecting it, so it's kind of a routine thing. No big deal. Don't worry about it. I'll be back soon. So the next day, the crew throws a party, a going away party for Kirk, and singing for "He's a Jolly Good Fellow" and hooting and hollering as Captain Zarlo makes his comes aboard the ship. And as that happens, Kirk is on his way out, and Captain Zarlo immediately orders something called a nuke malfunction drill, and he wants it repeated each day for 5 days. Scotty makes a comment that it's the ugliest work on a starship.
Yeah, drills, come on.
Yeah, come on.
Everybody has to do drills.
Yeah, so we'll get into what the drill is a little bit here in a minute, but a couple days later, on the planet Mobita, we see Kirk. He is disguised as a horned alien, and he's sitting in what looks like a towny bar. And, of course, it wouldn't be Kirk if he didn't get into a bar fight with some of the locals. They start... Well, it's not his fault, though. They pick a fight with him. Seems almost like kind of a racial battle going on there.
Yeah.
And, but unfortunately, Kirk winds up getting arrested, and, he gets the better of his adversaries and winds up getting himself arrested. But that turns out to actually be a ruse. He arrives in a kind of a dark room where there's kind of a guy sitting there alone, who introduces himself as the Prime Minister Otto. And Otto explains that there's a rebel faction of Tagotas who he feels they have spies among his people, and therefore he has to be careful who he's seen associating with. So that's why he had to have that act of subterfuge to get Kirk there. So Otto is naturally curious as to why Kirk would want to meet with him, since the Federation doesn't usually interfere with the development of worlds. Yeah, there it is. And Kirk proceeds to tell him that the Federation suspects, and here's the bomb drop, that the Klingons are behind the rebellion by the Tagotas, and that would explain the modern weapons that the Tagotians are suddenly in possession of. So we're going to pull the ship over, and we're going to talk about this section here. And God, there's a bunch of places to start here, but I guess I want to just point out another artistic change, and the fact that the captain's log is now handwritten in cursive.
Well, right, in cursive, and it's we'll see it later on. The new Captain Zarlo also has it like that, and it's like, sorry, it's dinner time for my cat. So you see, even Zarlo uses that same device, and I'm really curious now if they're gonna keep that, because it's totally new.
It is, yeah.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, it was dinner time for post there, so
No problem.
I had to make sure he got his dinner. Okay, now I'm back.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see if they keep that cursive thing in subsequent issues, because now it appears, since you've got two captains writing in cursive in their captain's log, maybe this is a new mandate by Starfleet.
Right. Trying to keep the dream of cursive alive.
Yeah, really. I hardly ever use it anymore, and when I do, it's hard for me to write in it these days. But
but I gotta say, I love this setup, of the story here. The way it all rolls out. Uhura is actually like getting something cool to do, which is like her job. Actually, like, pressing the dude on what the orders are, and all that. And then, although McCoy's little joke here of, as they say, HQ works in mysterious ways, its wonders to perform. Like, that just seemed like a complete non sequitur to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. And, I really like, there's a couple things in here that I want to point out, little things. I really like that they kept the Klingon reveal at least a little ways into the story. They didn't dump it on the teaser page, didn't
Right.
dump it on the cover. So you thought, you weren't sure what you were getting yourself into, and then all of a sudden they drop the Klingon bomb on you, and you're like, okay,
And then you're like,
yep, totally. That was a big ding for me. I was like, oh, I'm totally on board with this story now.
yeah. Have we even had Klingons in the series before?
Yeah, yeah, they've been in Gold Key before.
Like, where
But
you actually see them and stuff?
yeah, but I want to say that in this issue, I think more than the previous time we've seen them, they're actually very true to TOS Klingons in it, both appearance and motives.
Yeah.
They are textbook Klingons from the original series. So I don't want to flip those cards too much because we're going to get more into that part later when we actually see them and get some dialogue from them. But I absolutely love the fact that that the Klingons in this were written as if it was a TOS episode. So
Yeah.
although it is kind of a repeated Klingon trope, but that's okay.
That's fine.
So some
I'm on
strange
board.
things though. In juxtaposition to that, we've got another reference to Starfleet being called HQ, which
Yeah.
still bugs me a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a Gold Key thing. They've used it a bunch of times in the past. Not a huge fan of it, but okay. Willing to let it go. The naming though, Captain Zarlo. God, sounds like a Star Wars character,
Right.
doesn't it? Not to turn this into a Star Wars versus Star Trek conversation because I'm clearly a fan of both franchises, but
Right.
one of the things that always, I think I probably even said this before, maybe not on a Gold Key, but, and feel free to crucify me on social media for this, but one of the things that I don't like about Star Wars is that the names of people sound so ridiculous to me in Star Wars. I don't know what it is, but they just don't sound like real names. They just don't. I don't know what it is, but some of them really bother me. And crucify me if you want. Captain Zarlo totally sounds like a Star Wars name to me.
Yeah, it really does. And the guy, just like looking at him, the way that he's drawn, I would say that he looks fairly like Italian, Spanish, like
He does.
Mediterranean,
Yes. Agreed.
And so I tried to like match that with the name, but like,
Yeah, no.
Got
No.
nothing.
No, didn't happen. Well, one thing we do know about Captain Zarlo, though, is that he has a reputation for being a chicken.
Yes, the most chicken.
The most chicken, according to Scotty. So he doesn't really live up to that, though, I think, in this issue.
No.
Yeah, I think that's misdirection.
Yeah. Classic misdirection.
Classic misdirection.
So there is some kind of clumsy dialogue here on this first proper page, and,
Sure
and
is.
the most chicken commanders. So Scotty says, and have you heard that this Captain Zarlo is one of the most chicken commanders in the service? And Spock's reply is, I see nothing harmful in efficiency, Mr. Scott. Like, there's not.
Yeah.
He wasn't talking about efficiency.
Yeah, completely disconnected. It almost seems like there's missing dialogue there, or a missing exposure that Spock knows something about this Captain Zarlo guy already, and that maybe he shies away from combat, but he's better at other stuff.
Right.
He's great at running a ship. Terrible at fighting Klingons. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's why they didn't send Captain Zarlo to the planet. They sent Kirk instead because he's good at fighting Klingons.
Right.
I don't know. We'll get into that too, by the way. But you know what? Another really great, really brief character moment here that I thought was really well done was that it seems like Spock is really in tune with Kirk's emotional state. I like the fact that this is like they have that TOS Kirk Spock relationship, even if it's only for 2 panels.
Yeah.
Spock on the what is it, page 4 for me? Yeah, page 4 for us in the digital one. Panels 3 and 4, Spock is questioning Kirk when they're alone. Spock says, "You seem quite agitated for a man who just received a routine expected command." And Kirk replies, "Say what you wish, Mr. Spock, but don't trouble the others with your theories." And then Spock is thinking as Kirk walks away, "He's more upset than I realized. What is waiting for him?" So I like that you have that little snippet of the Kirk Spock relationship making it into the comic.
Yeah, and it really does. I think it does justice to the character of Spock because, obviously, the thing about the Vulcans is like they're emotionless, right? And it's as Spock would always correct us. It's not that Vulcans don't have emotions; it's that they suppress them. And these two panels really kind of show an emotional intelligence to Spock.
Yes.
Right. That he is not like he can catch the nuances of Kirk's emotional state just in sort of subtext of what he says and how he carries himself.
Yep.
And I thought that was just a very true to Spock moment.
Yep, I completely agree. Great stuff. What else? You know what? This, I may be right, I may be wrong. I'm not entirely sure, but I think I'm right. On the bottom of that page, right under the Spock and Kirk exchange there's a panel which I think is a gold key first. I think we have the entire crew, well, the repeating main characters all in one panel together, including there's Chapel.
Yep.
So everyone is there. So from right to left, we've got Sulu, Chekhov, Kirk, Uhura, Spock, Chapel, McCoy, and Scotty. So I think that's it.
Yeah.
That's a gold key first, if I'm not mistaken.
It may very well be, because usually they bring in Chapel whenever they don't have McCoy, and vice versa. And just getting Chekhov anywhere in a panel seems to be rare.
Exactly. Yeah, he's very scant so far in gold key. So that was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
I want to take a quick screen grab of that and throw that up there on our website just as a historic reference. Because I don't know if we'll see that again, but that's pretty cool.
And also pretty well drawn, I gotta say.
Yeah. I think the only one that's a little off to me is Chapel, but it's obvious that it's her.
Right. The hair is a dead giveaway.
The hair is a dead giveaway. And of course you got Caucasian Uhura in the background, but it's clearly Uhura. An inking problem, of course. Lack of color palette. But, good stuff there. So what exactly is a nuke malfunction drill? Nuke to me implies nuclear weapons.
Right. You wouldn't use the word nuke for like a nuclear reactor.
Correct. Yeah.
So I don't know. Like if we're gonna try to retcon this at all, which us, we always do. Here's my running hypothesis, which is that you remember in Balance of Terror.
Yep.
Right. They mentioned that the old Romulan war was fought with nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So what if, sure, they've got all these newfangled phasers and photon torpedoes, but what if they've also still got some old style nuclear weapons aboard, and so they maybe have drills that do that,
Perhaps, but I keep thinking back to, is it Tomorrow Is Yesterday? Where they find themselves in back in Earth, back orbiting Earth in the 60s, and the
Sean Jeffrey Christopher and all that.
Yeah, and Spock. I remember Spock saying that Captain Christopher's airplane had nuclear weapons, old style nuclear weapons on it that could be very damaging to the ship. if he were to
Yeah.
shoot, which implied to me that they don't have that kind of weaponry anymore. I mean, if they had it on board, I would think Spock would say something like, "Well, nuclear weapons similar to the ones we have on board." Something of that
Right.
nature, but I don't know. No definitive proof here. That's just supposition on my part.
Yeah.
But,
and of course, it could just be that they got the nomenclature wrong, and he's referring to like a nuclear reactor of some kind.
Okay.
Maybe fusion or something.
Yeah. Fair enough. Made for a fun discussion, though. I
Yeah.
always like ripping these little things apart. I'm sure there was really nothing meant by it, but interesting enough that they use, and they call it an NME, right?
Right, or enemy.
Yeah, but another thing that kind of stuck out to me about this issue, especially here in the beginning, is it seems like they went out of their way to name things. So you've got several different alien species referred to by name. You've got Mobians, Caffrians, and Tagotas. And then you have Eula wine and Zonka knives. I mean, they keep naming things that don't necessarily need to be named. Like, they say Caffrians as a race, but they don't have any bearing on the issue at all. In fact, they're not mentioned again after that. It's really Mobians and the Tagotans, right?
Yeah, and those are the kind of the two species at the crux of the issue.
Yeah, it's like they're setting up like a three-way racial tension when it's really only a two-way.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what that was about. And it just seemed kind of extraneous that they would, instead of just saying wine and knives, they have to give them distinctions.
Right.
Names.
Our special space knives.
Yes.
And our special space wine.
Yeah. Eula and Zonka. Oh, interesting. And did you catch the piece of the action throwback? As Kirk is getting walked off by the police, he's saying he's getting thrown in the cooler.
Oh, yeah.
I immediately thought right back to piece of the action. It says, here's Kirk in his disguise getting walked away. He's saying, "Why me?" He knocks me down and pulls a knife, and I go to the cooler. So yeah, immediately.
But hey, it's okay. You don't have to worry. They'll give him the Prime Minister's suite.
Yes. Ha. Oh man. So again, you get the Klingon setup here right at the end of this section, and I both like and dislike that it's the same old Klingon trope of swoop in on a primitive culture, give them some weapons, and use them to help conquer this world. In fact, this is not the last time we'll see it. In fact, in recent Star Trek comics, in the Planet of the Apes crossover, the Klingons do the same thing.
Which I mean, that completely to me makes sense when you consider that the Klingons were kind of proxies for the Soviets, right?
Of course.
And during the Cold War, especially back then in the 60s and 70s, what were the Soviets doing? They were going into not very well developed countries, arming the troops and like arming the people, and so that they would have like a communist revolution in that country. And like we saw that in Korea and Vietnam, and like just all over the place, right? So it's like it gets kind of old, but I mean, it got kind of old in real life. You know what I mean?
Well, of course, but in the case of the Klingons, they keep failing. I mean, wouldn't you think it's time to take the playbook and throw it away? Like, all right, listen, the Federation keeps screwing us up every time we try this. They come in, somebody comes in and screws up our plans and exposes us, and then we get ousted.
Always Kirk.
Damn that Captain Kirk, and man, and he's gonna do it again, and he'll do it again, Planet of the Apes, and plenty of other times. But I think it might be time for the Klingons to get a new coach.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. But, anything else you want to throw in about this first section?
Let's see.
We'll be picking up on page 9, by the way. We
Oh,
ended on page 8.
so going back a little bit to page 5, or technically page 4, um, where the captain swap is happening,
Yep.
right? Is it just me, or is it just like the crew is kind of trying to rub their their affection for Kirk in the new captain's face, Captain Zarlo's face, like right away,
Yeah, no,
like
absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely. That they're cheering and screaming for Captain Kirk, and
and
so much
singing for
so
"He's
that,
a jolly good fellow" and all
yeah,
this.
so much so that Zarlo gets all bent out of shape in the last panel. It does his pointing routine. You're
Right.
all dismissed. Get out of my face. He
It's
doesn't
like
actually
maybe
say
he
that,
wouldn't
but
have been such a jerk to you guys if you weren't such a jerk to him, like
yeah,
right off the bat.
he comes in storming by the first thing he says is, "You'll find me fair but not soft," and then issues his first order to begin the nuke malfunction emergency drill each day for
Yep.
5 days. So he's got to establish his dominance. Very alpha captain male.
Right.
I like the Scotty in the background here in panel 3 yelling "Hooray!"
Right.
with the balled fists.
Hip hip.
Yeah.
And I did like when there's the panel that says, then as the commander pro tem is piped aboard, and then you hear the wee wee, like that's
Yeah.
the bosun's whistle. Like,
Oh yeah.
hey, I don't know that we've ever had that in the
I
Gold
don't
Key
think we
before.
have. Yeah, I don't think we have. I didn't pick up on that until you just did the sound effect. Yeah, nice
But it
one.
was totally a staple of the original series.
Certainly.
Heard it all the
Certainly
time.
was. Yeah, so I guess that really speaks to McWilliams having more source material to work from.
Yeah.
Because that wouldn't be in a promotional photo. He'd have to actually see Star Trek episodes to know what that sound was.
Yep.
So, all right. So we're gonna pick up here on page 9 or page 8 if you've got the physical comic book. So Prime Minister Otto is telling Kirk that Mobita is a relatively young planet, and they've only recently discovered the jungle of Togo and started to explore it. The people living in it were before unknowns to them. So at first, the Togotan people living in the jungle had been very trusting and seemed quite innocent. They were kind of artisans and artists. And they were so trusting and innocent that they were nicknamed the Sweet People. So not long after that, of course, as what always seems to happen to these types of people, the locals began to take advantage of them and started using them as slave labor and treating them quite cruelly. So Prime Minister Otto explains that he tried to meet with the Togotan leaders to make peace, but they would no longer accept or trust him. So then suddenly, out of nowhere, the Togotans began to attack the Mobian people with modern weapons, which they had none. They had no weapons to speak of when they were originally discovered. So Kirk tells Otto that Starfleet recently intercepted some transmissions from the Klingons that indicated that they had dropped a team of military advisors on the planet of Mobia almost a year ago. So they've had quite a head start there. Kirk decides that he's going to travel into the forest to prove that the Klingons are actually there. So Otto gets one of his professional makeup guys to help disguise Captain Kirk, and then tells him that the disguise will only work at a distance because, get this is the first time this has ever happened, the Togotans don't talk, they communicate by projecting mental pictures. More telepathic aliens.
Yep.
Kirk will be discovered by the Togotans if they try to communicate with him and he's unable to communicate in return. So just the scene cuts to Kirk sneaking up on the outskirts of a village in a jungle, and he's observing Klingon soldiers training the native people. As he's taking pictures with a little tiny micro camera, a Klingon guard sneaks up on him from behind and captures him and takes him before the Togotan leader. Kirk tries to explain why he's come there, but Chief Mweepy orders him to be judged in combat to determine the truth. So once again, we're going to stop. And wow, I'll tell you, Kirk can never pull off a successful spy mission. He always gets caught, man.
Yep.
Doesn't he ever? Doesn't he get training on this?
No, that's the whole point. They deliberately send like the most untrained guy.
I know. That's silly. I had to suspend my disbelief in this because it just seems like Starfleet and Gold Key especially, they keep sending Kirk on these missions that really have nothing to do with his wheelhouse. I mean, he's a starship captain.
Right.
But they keep sending him on these missions where he has to be in disguise and, fit in with the natives and get pictures of Klingons. And I don't know. Is it me, or does it seem far too easy to disguise yourself as another race in Gold Key?
Yeah, especially like this particular one where he was the Caffrian.
Yeah.
He just he was just wearing a little mask.
It's like a rubber mask.
Like a rubber mask, and then the when he was the Tagotan, they gave him some body paint and a rubber mask.
Yeah, and the Klingon just literally pulls the rubber mask off of his face. I mean,
yeah,
how good must that rubber mask be? I mean, I can see you put on a mustache or something,
right.
some glasses, or I don't know, but this seems really far-fetched and very unlikely that you could do an entire race change on yourself and get away with it. I mean, especially you're in a jungle, a moist jungle. I mean, that makeup would melt right off. I mean, you're brushing against fronds and underbrush. I mean, it's definitely gonna rub that makeup off.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of these things that is never really thought that far through, which I guess is why, in TNG and on, it was always, surgical alterations.
Right. Exactly.
Instead of
Kirk
instead
had
of
one of
makeup.
Those two in Gold Key. He had one of those in Gold Key. So
except the
turn into
surgery
Afro
was just,
Kirk.
right.
Get Afro Kirk. Now, you know what, though? I'm picking it apart. I'm picking the issue apart, and I have some positive stuff to throw out, too. I want to say that I'm overjoyed, and I'm very, very happy that the untouched civilization that was found turned out to be extremely peaceful and loving and artisanal. They're, artists creating these wonderful carvings that Kirk refers to as museum quality.
Right.
So they're not just mindless savages. They actually develop into an intelligent, artistic culture, which I would love to believe is what we might be if we were untouched by civilization. I don't know if that's what it would be, but I love the fact that they're actually productive and emotive people.
Yeah, and you can. I like the whole kind of backstory of them, how they were really nice and everything, but then, they started getting enslaved and, all this, and then the Klingons got to them, and so you see that character sort of change over just a couple short pages to get to where they are now. But it was just, I don't know, it was an interesting story, and it was a very Star Trek story. It's I always like to say that the best Prime Directive episodes are the Sorry for Colonialism episodes.
Yep.
And this is definitely a Sorry for Colonialism issue.
Completely. Yeah, and I like how you have just enough backstory to let us know how it went down without hitting you over the head with it too much and going into too much detail. So essentially, you've got this loving, not necessarily primitive, but not necessarily primitive culture that gets taken advantage of and enslaved, and then a dissenting race comes in and influences them and kind of eggs them on, and they become something that they weren't, and it makes perfect sense. We've seen that happen not only in Star Trek but in the real world.
Yeah,
It's
all
very
the freaking
easy
time.
for a superior power to come in and take an inferior race that could go either way, and use their superiority and technology to influence them to do what they want them to do. We went over this a little bit earlier. You gave us some great parallels to real world, but it's succinctly done in this issue, but they give you enough to where you can put that all together in your head and understand why
Yeah,
it's going on, and enough to even question the motives of the Mobian people, right?
right.
You think this is the prime minister. He's in charge. This all happened under his watch. What was he doing?
Yeah,
Right? He wants to
yeah,
make peace now, but they're his people that were enslaving and murdering and kidnapping these poor natives.
yeah. Well, I would guess that maybe he was not the prime minister at the time that
Maybe.
it started happening.
Hmm.
Um, because it definitely, like, he has he like his story sounds a lot like the stories of a lot of places, like here, Canada. I mean, not as much here, but Canada, Australia, where, like, the sort of aboriginals of wherever they are
Mm-hmm.
were completely exploited during the colonial era, um, and that now they're trying to make some way towards a reparation, with them, and his story sounds a lot like that. So that's what leads me to believe that it was probably not under his watch in particular, but one of his predecessors, and that he
Okay.
really is genuine in trying to,
Oh, sure.
you know, turn over a new leaf in all this.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. You see the weirdness of the townies in the bar,
Yeah.
and you see how much tension there is between a couple of different factions there. So it seems like the prime minister's got his hands full
Yeah,
with his
totally.
own people, and whoever these other Kefkian guys are, and then you've got the Tegotans that they've enraged. So he's got a lot on his plate. This poor guy.
Yeah. And there was one other interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that statue that was a self-portrait of Mwipi,
Yeah.
uh, it was originally bought from Mwipi for 1 pouch of Tanuri tobacco.
Yep. Another named substance.
And I think maybe the first reference to tobacco in Gold Key.
You're probably right.
Uh, and it's, well, I guess you could say, well, it's the 70s. Like, everyone was still smoking
God,
up a
yeah.
storm back then.
Oh my God, my mom used to send me into the convenience store with a $5 bill, and I could barely even reach the counter to buy her 2 packs of Benson and Hedges.
Oh, yeah.
And they used to give them to me with matches.
Yeah.
With matches. So yeah, and interesting. They give you this idea of inflation by saying now
Right.
it costs 20,000 Mobian credits for that same statue.
Yeah. And I wonder what the reason for it, that part was never made clear to me.
No, and I think that's another shortcoming of the very short format that
Yeah.
we're in, is they couldn't necessarily flesh that out. They could have used another panel or two, I think, to
Yeah.
talk about the downfall of that
Do
society.
you have any ideas for what might be behind it?
Well, I mean, if you extrapolate here a little bit, so when they first run into this race in the jungle, they're it's a purely artistic society, and they're willing to barter, right, for
Right.
things that they may not have, or things that are very difficult for them to acquire. And I think as they're being enslaved and murdered and kidnapped and things, there are less of them, of course, to create
Right.
these works of art. And of course, as with anything that has any sort of a value, I guess I would think that the people who are kidnapping them and enslaving them are forcing them to create these things and then selling them to people who are interested in them, kind of like ivory, right?
Right.
You know, they become almost taboo or forbidden items, or very highly sought after. See, it's kind of, I don't want to get into too much of a discussion on real world baubles, but it's kind of like the diamond industry.
Oh yeah.
In a way, right? I mean, a certain group of people seize up all of or most of the mines and the production of these quote unquote precious stones, so they get to set the prices on them and say, hey, if you want it, you got to come to me. You got to go through me.
Yeah, you gotta love monopolies.
You got to, and and of course the same situation exists in our own world, where you have slave labor working in mines to dig up these precious gems that are all fed into the coffers of these the exploiters.
Right.
I would assume that's what they want you to get out of this very short explanation of what happened, but that's where my mind went.
Okay, I'm on board.
Okay, a little dark for Star Trek, but definitely feels like something that could have happened.
Totally.
But hey, on a happier note, well, maybe it's not a happy note depending on if you're a fan or not. But if you look at page 12 on the digital copy, where the Klingon is pulling off Kirk's mask, that Klingon looks a lot like Sonny Bono to me.
Oh, really? I was going to say Ian McShane.
Nice. I went Sonny Bono. But, yeah. So, I like when you see a kind of a weird celebrity likeness.
Yeah.
In some, and doesn't
Kirk... It is probably Sonny Bono, because, Ian McShane was a lot younger back in the 70s.
Yeah, this was probably prime Sonny and Cher time.
Yep.
Yeah, and, I think that Kirk in the panel directly above that, where he's at the little camera, like, kind of has a little Bruce Willis-y look to him.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. But,
and I kind of dug that camera, too.
Yeah, it's that's an interesting thing here, an interesting take on, the future, because if that was today, he'd be holding on to an iPhone or something.
Right.
Taking snapshots, but this is kind of like a little micro camera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little spy camera.
Yeah. Pretty cool. I like that the supposition that that's what a camera would look like in the future.
Totally.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because they just expected stuff to get smaller and smaller, and not like. And
it has for the most part. I mean, you can get cameras that look like that, or even smaller than that now.
Yep.
So they had that down. Anything else you want to throw out before we move on? We stopped on page 14.
Yeah, just one more thing, which was I kind of liked how Kirk was trying to keep his distance so that they didn't try to swap pictures, as he said.
Yeah, he was going to shying away, giving like a distant wave. Like, hey guys, busy over here hunting. Want to catch up later.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting because it kind of establishes a fairly cut and dry range to their communication ability.
Good call. Yeah, or a range at which they won't bother. John's over there by the oak tree. Yeah, it's a little bit far. Takes a little more mental energy to get that far. But the funny thing is, and we don't see this until later in the comic, when they say they communicate with mental images, they're actually almost like holograms that they project.
Yeah, totally.
So that's actually different. That's something new, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Kind of a matrixy thing.
Yeah.
Almost.
So, hollow emitters without the emitters. So they could have conjured up the Doctor from Voyager.
They could have.
At any rate, so actually we're picking up the last two panels of page 13, by the way, because it makes more logical sense to break there.
Yeah.
So if you're going to follow along here. So meanwhile, we're back on the Enterprise. Captain Zarlo I think he's being the stereotypical tough captain.
Mm-hmm.
And he orders Scotty to perform the nuke malfunction emergency drill yet again, despite the crew having set a new record time for the drill. Zarlo insists that they beat the record easily, quote, because the previous record was obviously set by a crew even lazier than this one, Mr. Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like he's being unnecessarily difficult here. Maybe a
Yeah.
little overboard. But we shift back to the planet Mobita. Kirk has faced Mweepy, and he is now facing a hulking judge in single combat. Once again, Kirk is in combat. So Kirk is able to knock that warrior down with a big kick to the throat. But then
tell me, and tell me that when this fight was going on, you didn't have going through your head. Da, 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 da,
Yeah,
da, 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 da.
a bit. But I was kind of thrown. Well, we'll get into this a little more in a minute. But this is another one of those situations where I was kind of taken out of the action by Kirk telegraphing a lot of his moves.
Oh yeah.
And what was going on. That seems to be a real gold key thing.
Yeah.
But so Kirk thinks he's won, but surprise, surprise, he is attacked by several weird-looking creatures, which turn out to be projections, illusions of projections that are being sent out by the warrior that he's just bested in combat. So in desperation, Kirk grabs a hold of Chief Mweepy and holds a knife to his throat to make an escape. So the two of them leave the village together, and Kirk takes that opportunity to warn the chief about the Klingons and their nefarious motives. So they reach a giant clearing, and a spaceship arrives. The one we saw on the cover happens to be a Mobian spaceship with the little skids on the bottom. It arrives to pick up Captain Kirk, and Mweepy watches as Kirk climbs aboard the ship and appears to leave the scene, but sneaky, once the chieftain walks away, it turns out that Kirk didn't actually leave, and he's hiding in the underbrush and heading back towards the village, determined to find a
sneaky
way
bastard
to defeat the Klingons. Kirk and those Klingons, man. So
yeah.
we're gonna stop right here because we're getting close to the end of the issue. But
yeah,
of course, what the question lingers: what could any replacement captain on the Enterprise do to possibly be accepted by the crew? I mean, and not only that, if you're a temporary captain coming on for a week or two,
yeah, like a substitute teacher.
Yeah, would you really go to these lengths?
No.
I'm not sure what Zarlo's motivation is. I mean, is he, bucking for a promotion here? Is he looking and say, hey, Starfleet Command, look, you put me on the Enterprise for 2 weeks, and I did a better job than Kirk did. The crew is more efficient now because of me. I'm really not sure what his end game is.
Yeah, I don't know. He's really got kind of a Jellicoe vibe to him, where Jellicoe was also, a temporary replacement, and yet immediately went into, riding everyone really tough. I don't know, like there's like the promotion angle maybe, but it seems like he's just being too much of a jerk about it for there to be any sort of self-interest.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Like, he doesn't have a stated agenda, and you would think that if he did have an agenda, that he would try to work more peaceably with the crew to attain that agenda first before going to the the hard ass. But I don't know. Maybe that's just his personality style. But there is a personal log here, as you mentioned earlier, from Captain Zarlo. I think this may be the first time we see a captain's log by a non-member of the Enterprise crew.
Yeah.
And it's written in cursive, in the same handwriting, by the way, as Captain Kirk. I don't know what's going on
here.
Now. It says, ship's crew still continues to reject me. My compliments to the personal charms of Captain Kirk, wherever he may be. And the exclamation points are all there, even in the handwritten logs.
Yep.
Everything has exclamation points. So, wow. Okay, so interesting that, again, I throw away stuff, but interesting to me that on the big splash page for part 2, there is a little blue dialogue box here, or a little blue text box that says, "And in a makeshift jungle arena, Captain Kirk stands face to face with the local justice of the peace."
Right.
This is not an Earth parallel
No.
world that they're on. Justice of the peace. I don't know why that term would be there. I know I'm picking it apart, but that bugs me. I mean, I can understand the word judge, maybe, executioner, maybe. Justice.
Although I don't know where Lord High Executioner comes from.
Yeah, I don't get that either. But yeah, that's in the dialogue from Kirk there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll let it go. I just thought it was that kind of took me out of it a little bit, but that made way for Kirk zinging one-liners during his trial by combat, which seems a little non-Kirk-like. I mean, unless you take the fight at the end of Star Trek 3 into account with the whole "I'm sick and tired of you" part, but you know. A lot of telegraphing here on page 15. Cool combat shots, though.
Yeah.
I like Kirk ducking out of the way there.
I was a little surprised that Kirk didn't do the, the double leg kick.
Oh, yeah. Yep. The Hulk Hogan
the Captain
leg
Kirk drop kick.
Yeah, the Hulk Hogan leg drop. And no neck chops. No kung fu neck chops.
Not a one.
No, but he's very adept at dodging that space rhino.
Right.
The Mohawk rhino.
Or a Sprino, as I like to say.
Rhino, yeah. Very good depiction of a rhino with spikes on its back, though.
Yeah.
I kind of like the artwork there. It's dusting up. For an illusion, it's dusting up an awful lot of sand behind it.
Right, and then we see the bird snake thing from the cover.
Yeah, and doesn't look the same.
No, like it kind of makes more sense in the comic now.
It certainly does. Yeah, because it's an airborne creature, and the cover made it seem like it was a land-based creature.
Right, like it just crawled around.
Yeah. But Kirk is interesting that Kirk's able to cut an illusion with a sword. Does that mean that? In my mind, that means it's not an illusion.
Right, exactly. Like when I was first reading, the issue, and I got to that panel, I saw that, and I was like, well, he was just talking in the previous panel about when he's going to run into a real one, and that thing seems to be, shredded apart rather than the poofy smoke of the space rhino. And so I just looking at it, because I always look at the picture, then read the words. Mm-hmm. So before I read the words, I totally thought, oh, that must have been the real one. And then I read, and it's like, oh, no, it was another illusion.
Nope, there are no real ones.
Right, only Zool.
Yeah, only nice. Ghostbusters references. But, yeah, and that made me wonder, though, if it was actually an illusion, the sword should have just passed straight through it.
Exactly.
Right? So this is more like a manifestation, or they're creating something out of thin air or whatever molecules they're coalescing into something, right? Whatever matter they're drawing from whatever sources to create these beasts. Because if it's an illusion, it couldn't hurt him.
Right.
So, all right. Well,
unless of course, it's one of those, if you die in the Matrix, you die in real life things.
Oh, right. Right. Good call. Yeah, that could be as well. They don't get that deep into it.
Yeah, not really.
But, well, it's an interesting concept, and I like the fact that I was sort of misled earlier, and I assumed that it meant, when they said they communicated with mental images, I really thought that meant telepathy, person-to-person telepathic communication, not actually manifesting images out of thin air that anybody could see.
Yeah.
I kind of like that concept.
Yeah, it makes just... you want to see more of just the culture living a day-to-day life kind of thing.
Man, if only they could do that in Darmok.
Yeah, right?
It made it a hell of a lot easier. Let's see here. What else do we have? Oh, page 17, panel 2. We were talking about the barter system versus the Mobian credits. Kirk actually mentions cash.
Yep.
Now, that kind of stuck out to me.
Yeah.
That
But
it's the Klingons want cash. He says, whatever you have of value, your art, your labor, your very lives, they'll turn into cash and power.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I don't think in any of the series we ever got uh, even a mention of Klingon currency.
Nope, I don't think so. Not that I recall, anyway. So maybe the Klingons do use paper money.
Yeah, could be.
And Kirk would refer to it as cash, maybe. Or Klingon cash. It almost sounds like some sort of a, a
like Disney
special
dollars.
store currency. Right? Oh, man. Let's see.
And I loved when Kirk gives Weepy the slip in the little helicopter thingy. It was just like, just so transparently Kirk.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you knew anything about the guy, you would have seen it coming a mile away. But of course, Weepy doesn't. He's just met him and all this. But I don't know. It brought a smile to my face when I saw that.
Yeah, it was a pretty cool Kirk moment, I will admit. But I do have the question about why would he actually stay there? He's got evidence that the Klingons are there. Why not go back and regroup? Bring in the cavalry. Alert Starfleet and let Starfleet come in and fix it. Because going back by himself seems really. It does seem something like Kirk would do, but it does seem quite dangerous for a valuable flag officer to be going in and single-handedly trying to take on Klingons and an army of armed natives.
Right.
That he just narrowly escaped from. But anything else before we move on to the closure?
No, actually, the closure itself, I've got a lot to say. So
okay,
I'm raring to get to it.
Page 19, we're picking up and going straight through to the end. So the Enterprise receives a coded message that Captain Kirk has disappeared, and somehow this message is coded in some sort of old Scottish method.
No, Cockney rhyme.
Cockney rhyme, sorry.
Yeah. So it's from London.
Yeah, so, all right, well, we can get into this in a minute.
Yeah.
How they would have... Anyway, never mind. So Captain Zarlo decides he's going to come clean and tell the crew the truth about Kirk's secret mission, to which the crew demands that the Enterprise go to Mobita and search for Kirk. So Zarlo, of course, refuses, because why would he agree to that? He's the replacement captain. He's got to be difficult. And he's backed up only by Mr. Spock. But when the crew threatens mutiny, Zarlo decides to agree and turns the ship towards planet Mobita. So back on the planet's surface, Chieftain Weepy uses his thought pictures to tell the Klingon warriors that his people will liberate the planet without their help. Kirk steps out of hiding and confronts the Klingons. Questionable choice. The Klingons call Kirk a spy, and Weepy again decides that yet another issue is to be decided by one-on-one combat.
Of course.
This time between Kirk and the Klingon leader. So again, we have another dialogue that happens during a fight. So Kirk and the Klingon are fighting each other, and they're having some discussions in the meantime. Kirk is accusing the Klingons of invading the planet in the guise of liberators, and they're going to just use the people and kill them all in battle so they can just wind up taking over themselves. Long story short, Kirk defeats the Klingon, and the Klingon threatens to call up to his ship and have it destroy the entire jungle. So, of course, just in the nick of time, the Enterprise arrives and sees the Klingon ship in orbit and fires off a warning shot across the bow of the Klingon ship. And, of course, the Klingons quickly fly away instead of causing an intergalactic incident. and abandon their soldiers on the surface of the planet. So the Klingons are defeated, and Weepy and Otto are able to make a tenuous peace between their people once again and promise to learn to talk to each other and make amends for the past. And close the scene, close the episode, Enterprise leaves orbit, and we are done. So, happy ending. Klingons get their comeuppance, and plenty of things to talk about. So, I'll let you kick it off.
Well, so first off, I wanted to actually mention that the name of the planet kept changing throughout the issue. It keeps going back and forth between Mobia and Mobita.
Yes.
And that was just a little jarring there.
Yeah, very weird. I don't know if it was typos, or I mean, not typos because they're actually obviously handwriting this, but maybe little mistakes in certain panels.
Yeah, but other than that, my actual first thing to say is just on the art. This guy McWilliams, that was his name?
Yep.
He can draw an Enterprise.
Yes, he can.
Like, each one looks just great. And
yes, they do.
For the first time, I think, we actually see a Klingon ship.
Yep.
And it looks like a Klingon ship.
And it's orange.
Yeah. And it even looks like, I'm looking at, what page is this? 23, so second to last page. If you zoom in on that bottom panel on the wing of the Klingon ship, it even looks like Klingon writing, which I don't think was on the original model. I mean, I may be mistaken, but it totally looks like Klingon. And this is even before, the refit Katinga from Star Trek: The Motion Picture. That was still 2 years away.
Yep.
So I don't know where they got that from, or maybe that was the origin of that style, or yeah.
Yeah, but I do agree though. The Klingon ship looks great. So there was obviously some exposure to some source material that Williams was able to get to do a ship that close. I mean, proportionally too. If you look at the Klingon ships in the original series, I mean, it looks like he's got the proportions exactly right.
Yeah,
which is odd because I mean we've seen some really disproportionate ships drawn by Giolitti in previous issues, so much so that we would make point to call them out on it. But yeah, in every rendition of the ship, there's I think 3 different panels where you see it. Is it 3 or 4? No, 3 panels where you actually see that ship, and in each one, it looks really good.
Yeah.
A nice shot of the back.
4.
By the way, is 4? Am I missing one?
Yeah. Page 17.
Oh, all right. Yeah, right. Back further. Right. Yeah. But they all look really good, especially the final one on page 24, where you see it from behind.
Yeah. And that one, like, okay, it doesn't look like the back of a D7 as much, but like it looks good.
It does.
And the ship itself still is proportioned well, and you get that nice close up of the Klingon writing on the wing again.
Yep, and I like how you have the 2 ships on a different level of Z-axis and going in different directions. So give me an impression of space action, which I think it's kind of hard to depict sometimes in the comics.
Because you have such limited space.
Yeah, exactly, and this, it's a third of a page here, but I think they did a pretty good job of showing that the Klingon ship is flying away from the Enterprise, and there's no real battle taking place here. But pretty great overall. The couple of full space shots we get are well done.
Totally. Yeah. And it's just that was the thing that made me say, like, okay, I'm gonna give this McWilliams guy a chance, because like he can draw pretty good Enterprise and a pretty good Klingon ship. Let's see what else he can draw, Yep. So I'm actually looking forward to the rest of his run.
Yeah, me too, actually. I was very happy with the majority of this issue. His human figures are good. His likenesses of the crew are pretty good for a first time out. I'm hoping they get better. But the ships were exceptionally good.
Yeah.
And he seems to draw a lot more background actors. There's
totally.
a lot of people, and some of the earlier panels are very dense with people. So it seems to me he puts a lot of effort and time into this. So I'm very optimistic for future issues.
Yeah.
Were you confused by Zarlo's turnaround on page 19? It seems like I was confused as to his reasoning for turning around. Like, he says that he thinks he's earned the crew's respect, but I don't see anywhere on that page where it seems to me that he's earned any level of respect. Is he just referring to the fact that they gave him a choice by saying, well, hey, either you do this or we mutiny?
So it was confusing, and it took me, like, I had to read over it a couple times and sit there for a minute and parse it. But here's what I got out of it, right?
Okay.
So he's saying that he has never earned the kind of respect that the crew is showing to Kirk by everyone willing to mutiny to go get him.
Yep, I got you.
Right?
Yep,
and
makes sense.
So he's saying he's kind of in awe at their loyalty to him.
Gotcha. Yep.
And that's what turns him around.
I gotcha. Makes sense. I was thinking of it in the wrong context. Excellent. Thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah.
I'll cross that talking point out.
It definitely did take me a while to get to that point.
Yeah, I didn't.
Reading
it was not immediately apparent to me. Couple things though that I did like about that. Well, one thing in particular, I like that Sulu was pushing back.
Yeah.
On Zarlo, I thought that was a nice touch. It gives Sulu a little bit of a character moment that we don't usually get in Gold Key, and we didn't get a lot of in the original series. Nice to see that he's on the same page with the rest of the crew. Strange side note though, and I can understand this being a standing order for the Enterprise, but it's stated the Enterprise is not not authorized to fire on a Klingon ship without first being fired upon. I get that, but doesn't that leave them at a really huge tactical disadvantage? You know.
Yeah, it totally does. And like, not only that, but it's also kind of un-Star Trek like.
Yeah.
Because the old starship captains had a whole lot of leeway because they were so far away from Starfleet Command and all that, right? Like that they operated a lot more like, say, the British Navy, during the colonial era, and so it struck me as weird. Like it's like it was just put in there to kind of artificially create tension.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And tension that doesn't necessarily, because of the short format again, doesn't necessarily come to anything.
Right.
I do like the fact that it's suggested that, hey, we'll intentionally misfire across their bow as a warning shot, as a way to kind of gently skirt the regulations, as they always wind up doing in Star Trek.
Yeah.
But it definitely made it feel very TOS.
Yeah. And I kind of imagine, like, the court-martial afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, hey, did you fire on that ship?
No.
Well, I mean, it was a drill that we just happened to be running while there was a Klingon ship right in front of us.
Yeah, I guess they can go through the ship's log and see when the phasers were fired, so they can't just say, hey, all the torpedoes are accounted for. We didn't fire anything. Yeah. Good call. And one other thing I was going to mention before we get to our essential votes, I'm sure you have more, but I like the fact that it's alluded to in here that hanging is still a death penalty method for the Klingons. Seems very fitting.
Yeah.
No easy way out for a Klingon, right? So, and I would have thought they'd have even more brutal ways of giving out the death penalty, but hanging, I can see Starfleet having done away with the death penalty, period.
Yeah, sure.
But the Klingons, it makes perfect sense for them to have a death penalty and to be something physical and brutal, like hanging.
Yeah, and we know that Starfleet has gotten rid of the death penalty unless you go to Talos 4.
Yeah. Don't try to go there and live an illusionary paradisical life.
Yeah.
You'll get the death penalty for that.
Right.
Although I think there are worse planets that they discover down the road. But anyway, what
Yeah.
else you got for me before we close up?
Okay, so the whole Zeta bomb thing, the Zeta 12.
Zeta bomb, yes.
Okay, so that was a thing that we definitely had never heard in the series.
No.
Right? It almost sounds like a Corbomite device, right?
Yeah, secret weapon.
except real. And it was interesting because the way that he describes it, it kind of seems like neutron bomby to me.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it would like leave all your infrastructure in place and just kill the people, like that kind of thing. Yeah. And so it's kind of interesting that like the what are they called? The Togotans.
Yep.
The Togotans have transitioned so far away from being like devoted to peace and on the path to war that finding out about this Zeta 12 device is enough to like change their mind about the Klingons, right? They're like, wait a minute, you're holding out on like a really good weapon, say the formerly super peaceful people, you know?
Yeah, well,
like
that was just something that they couldn't have even conceived of until Kirk exposed it, right? They wouldn't even have thought of something. I mean, to them, the only weapons that they'd been exposed to, aside from, melee weapons, were whatever, guns or phasers or rifles the Klingons gave them.
Yeah.
So, naturally, why would any of them jump to the conclusion there was such a sophisticated weapon that the Klingons wouldn't have already shared with them? Maybe they thought this is the limit of what we're going to get. So, and honestly, if I was Mweepy and I'd been dealing with these Klingons for a year and they've been giving me, guns and swords and whatever, and having my people risk their lives only to find out that they had this Zeta bomb that could wipe out my adversaries for me without even having to risk a single life, I'd be pretty PO'd.
Yep.
Right? I would not be happy with the Klingons. I would be like, all right, you know what? Out. We don't need you people anymore. Obviously, there's some snake oil sales going on here.
Yeah. Classic Klingon.
Classic Klingons, yep. But I do like the fact that it is a classic Klingon script. It is a classic Klingon playbook.
Yeah.
I wish they'd come up with a different plan, but I can give them a pass because still early. Maybe they've only been foiled a couple times in the past that we've seen. So maybe they get like, well, listen, we're somewhere else. We're outside of the Federation. We're they're not gonna know we're here. They don't know we're here. So they intercepted the transmission. Oops. Now they know we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no uncoded messages on an open channel.
No, that's why you have to talk in Cockney.
Yes.
The wily Turk has missed his beard.
Yeah, I wonder, and it's not really necessarily clear who sent that message.
Didn't they? I thought they said
because Kirk's communicator was broken, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
So it wasn't.
Yeah,
Kirk.
which is why. So maybe it was maybe it was the Mobian.
Yeah, but how did they know Kirk went missing?
Yeah.
Were they out looking for him? Or maybe.
Well, he says that if he doesn't call into them, that they'll assume that he's dead.
Well, see, they need the auto return on the transporter from the animated series.
Right.
What the hell? Totally useful, man.
It really is.
That should be, you could set a timer on it for any length of time. Like, okay, well, you know what? I want this mission to last 3 days. And at that mark, the 3-day mark, boom, I'm automatically being back no matter what's happening. So you might get me, you may get a corpse. Either way, you'll have me back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Be easy, no?
Done and done.
Done and done. All right. Anything else before our essential votes?
Oh, just one last thing. I was
Okay.
going to go on a tangent about the Cockney rhyme, but I decided against that.
Okay.
Um, the only thing is just the very, very last panel,
Yep. Is that the
right?
attempted comedy?
It's the attempt at comedy, and it's not very funny,
It is not.
but it doesn't make me cringe like all the other times. So on that, well done, Gold Key.
Yes. Good job. And did you notice that McCoy actually gets the captain's name wrong? He says Captain
Oh,
Zorla.
Zorla.
It's supposed to be Zarlo, isn't it?
Right. You're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Huh.
so McCoy gets the name wrong. So, oops. So, in case anybody out there hasn't seen this or is not following along with us, the last panel is McCoy and Spock going for the classic TOS humorous outro,
Hmm.
and McCoy is saying, Zorla, misspoken, turned out to be a better commander than anyone figured. So can you be you? Oh wait a minute. So you can be replaced, Captain. Spock replies, "We all can be replaced, even an excellent ship's doctor. Doctor." Yeah, no. I mean, I could see that maybe get being funny, being done on screen because you could get the Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock
Yeah.
facial
With the
expressions,
eyebrow raise and all
the
that.
eyebrow
Yeah.
raise, and the dramatic comedic pause between the
Hmm.
doctor part. But yeah, it kind of falls flat in the comic format to me.
Yeah, but it so didn't make me cringe though, and on
No,
that, like, bravo.
it's not nearly as bad as some of the prior ones were.
Oh, they've been awful.
Yeah, they really have been. But well, going for our essential votes here, I'm just going to say right up front that unfortunately, I like that they included the Klingons and that they're totally in character. That was a big thing for me. I love that
Hmm.
when Gold Key finally gets things right. We've been following these along for 38-ish issues, minus the reprints, of course, and we found more deviations from normal Star Trek than we found parallels, right? And they get
Hmm.
things wrong more than they get things right. So when they get things right, I kind of have to cheer for, yeah, all right,
Right.
we're getting some classic Trek here. But that aside, I don't see anything that is really added to the Trek universe in this issue necessarily. There's the alien races are throwaways. They're just kind of thrown in for a one shot and they're going to be done. No new technology really. You don't get those cool video walking robots or anything like that in this.
Right.
Throwaway replacement captain in Zarlo. I mean, he doesn't really do anything significant or memorable that you'd want to refer back to him, or he would earn a spot in Trek history as a character that you talk about down the road. Honorable mention, I guess, for having a good Klingon representation, but really not essential in my book.
Well,
Ooh.
I couldn't disagree more.
Wow.
This one is totally getting an essential vote for me.
Nice.
I loved it from the very first page to the very last page. It felt completely like a Star Trek story,
Mm-hmm.
which, as you mentioned, is so rare in Gold Key. Um, everything everything about it was just hit all the right notes. Um, and I would say that, if because of course my criteria for essential ranking is a little bit different than yours, right?
Yep.
I tend to go more on the, is this, like, I take the word essential literally, right?
Yep.
Like,
Sure.
if you were doing a read through, which were the ones that you would be okay with skipping and which were the ones that you really should read. And this one is one that if you're doing a read through, you really should read. Um, and it feels the most Star Trek out of almost any of the other issues.
Hmm.
And the Klingons are in it. I freaking love the Klingons, right? Like, that was great seeing them in there, and Kirk getting to fight them, and I loved the Tagotans. I thought they were really interesting people. So yeah, at the end of the day, I'm giving this one an essential vote.
All right, so Ian and I disagree on this one. Where do you guys out there in listener land fall? Let us know on social media. We'd love to hear back from you and talk about this issue a little bit more with you. But that brings us to the end of this episode of the Tricorder Transmissions. And Ian, where can people find you if they're looking for you on social media?
Just find me on Twitter at Ian128K.
All right, and I am on Twitter at J_BENJ. And our show is the tricordertransmissions.com, facebook.com/the tricordertransmissions, and TTT_pod on Twitter. A quick shout out to our buddies over at Trek Geeks, Bill and Dan. Thanks a lot for all your support and constantly giving us shout outs on your show. And we love you guys. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate it. All right, so I guess that brings us to the end of another episode. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, by the way, if you're out there in the internet land and you feel like jumping by iTunes. Even just a star review is great, but any feedback is welcome. So let us know your opinions on the show so that we can try to make this show better for you. All right, and we will see you again next time on the Tricorder Transmissions.